Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today I'm going to be ranking all of the healer hero talents based on how much fun I had with them. I played every single healer, I tried out a bunch of different hero talent builds, and this is going to be my tier list video. Keep in mind, this video is looking at what is fun for me. You're more than welcome to agree or disagree with this. I'm going to be talking about the things that I enjoy, the things that stood out for me. And again guys, if you enjoyed this type of content, like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. But what actually makes a hero build fun for me? I'll be talking about the interactions that the hero talents have with the rest of your toolkit, with the rest of your talents. We'll be talking about the synergies. We'll be talking about certain gameplay changes. We'll also cover visuals, because I know a lot of people care about how these hero talents look and feel. And this is going to be the tier list that I'm going to be using. S tier is going to represent a hero talent that I feel is really fun to play. Keep in mind, this is not a power tier list, because power of hero talents can change every single week. I also have a more passive section, and this is placed kind of in between or in the middle of the list, because I do feel certain hero talents are a bit more on the passive side, which for me is neither good nor bad. But let's go and get started with my boy Restoration Shaman. For Resto Shaman, we're going to start off with Totemic, and I know for a lot of people this is going to be a game changer, because people really like Surging Totem, because it basically replaces Healing Rain, which means you'll never ever have to hardcast Healing Rain ever again. And this is a big deal for a lot of people, because it allows you to do other things. On top of that, you will have things like lively totems, which it's nothing new. It's kind of coming back in the War Within. You're getting this with Totemic, which means that certain totems are going to shoot out chain heals for you, which, based on my Mythiclus testing, there were certain dungeons where chain heal might account for a decent portion of my overall healing, but I barely ever had to hardcast chain heal. And in turn, you could say that with lively totems and surging totem, you're able to do other things, because these talents alone take care of a portion of your rotation. In terms of some of the implementation issues that I wish would be fixed, you can see here as an example, I have my surging totem, I'm placing it here. You can see the healing rain, and the only way to move this is spec into totemic projection, and then obviously make a keybind or possibly make a macro, and then you're able to move Surging Totem. Now, I wish this implementation would be more similar to the Vesper Totem, where you're able to click Surging Totem again and move it without having to waste a talent point in Totemic Projection. Now, I know there is kind of a bit of an issue in terms of how Downpour is implemented, but I was kind of hoping Blizzard would have a cleaner way of moving Surging Totem. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure about the best way to address this issue. All I'm saying is that this suggestion is stemming from the fact that based on certain Resto Shaman builds, my keybinds are absolutely full. So any solution that is going to help alleviate this is very welcome. But I had a blast playing Totemic Resto Shaman. I know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to gravitate towards Totemic Resto Shaman for some of the reasons that I mentioned already. And in terms of my ranking right now, in terms of fun, I'm going to be placing Totemic in A tier. I know there's a lot of people who might place it in S tier, but I do think there are certain issues with Totemic that could be improved in the future. So right now it's sticking in that A tier, but let me know your opinions. So now let's talk about Farseer, and Farseer is a lot different than Totemic. If you consider Totemic to have more synergy with Chain Heal, Farseer will have more synergy with things like Riptide. And I know for a fact there's a lot of people, myself included, early on looking at Farseer and did not really enjoy what it was bringing to the table, but they have, or Blizzard has changed Farseer in different ways in order to proc your Call of the Ancestors. Now, Call of the Ancestors is a little bit lazy in terms of the implementation, because it's very similar to Holy Priest Divine Image, but you can now proc it with Undulation. For the longest time, you had to run Unleash Life, which meant you have to run Unleash Life in Mythic Plus content, and I'm not a huge fan of Unleash Life in Mythic Plus. The fact that you can proc Call of the Ancestors with Undulation, it makes it a lot more smooth in my eyes, especially when you're doing that Mythic Plus content. There is a little bit of a caveat to this. I hope that Blizzard is going to balance them in such a way that you can pick Unleash Life or pick Undulation and not be punished. So tuning is still kind of ongoing, but the fact that you can proc it from more means is a really good thing. There are certain orangey elements part of the Farseer tree, depending on which build you're going to be running, but proccing multiple ancestors at the same time is actually pretty visually pleasing. And there is a lot of people who are going to be upset about the fact that if I'm playing Totemic, I don't have to hardcast Healing Rain, but if I'm playing Farseer, I'm going to have to go back to that gameplay where I'm hardcasting Healing Rain every 10 seconds. I'm one of the people who enjoys Totemic because you don't have to hardcast Healing Rain, but there has been a Shaman rework. There has been certain talents that have been changed, certain talents that have been introduced. For example, talents like Downpour, talents like Tidewaters, which make your Healing Rain feel more impactful. So I'm not against having to hardcast Healing Rain if it feels stronger, but that is of course going to depend on your build, and it's more to do with the Resto Shaman spec tree than Farseer itself. But with Farseer you also have talents like Ancestral Swiftness, which is going to replace your Nature Swiftness, but Ancestral Swiftness only has a 30-second cooldown, which means the amount of hardcasting you will do is going to go down because of the short cooldown of this talent. So Farseer has actually grown a lot on me over the last couple of weeks, especially since Undulation can proc all of the ancestors. Now keep in mind, tuning is ongoing and I hope the balance is going to be good, but in terms of my ranking for Farseer, it's so close to A tier, but I think I'm going to be placing it in B tier for now. I would like to do more testing of Farseer in raids and see how that feels as well, but I like the fact that Resto Shaman has two distinct hero builds. If I get tired of Totemic, I'm going to try out Farseer. If I'm tired of Farseer, I'll try out Totemic, and they do provide interesting choices, interesting gameplay choices, and I'm all for it. Now let's talk about Preservation of Evoker, and I'm going to be covering Chrono Warden first, and I think this is one of those hero talent trees that I had to really think about, because I've been enjoying Chrono Warden a lot, and it did make me think, am I enjoying Chrono Warden because it literally makes a large portion of the toolkit feel stronger, or am I enjoying Chrono Warden because it is actually intriguing gameplay or really fun gameplay? Because look at some of the talents that Chrono Warden has. You have Chrono Flame, which enhances your living flame. You have things like After Image, which enhances your empowered abilities. You have Reverberation, where Spirit Bloom also leaves a hot. Now, a lot of things that I mention here are borrowed power. A lot of the things, or how do I say, best of the borrowed power in Dragonflight is being squeezed into Chrono Warden when it comes to Preservation of Ogres in the War Within. But that's not everything that Chrono Warden does. You also have this kind of mini gameplay of buffing other allies, because it's going to make Tip the Scales feel like a more impactful cooldown through Temporal Burst. And then you also have Threads of Fate in terms of buffing allies. So there is multiple elements to Chrono Warden, but I actually had a blast while playing Chrono Warden. I do like the fact that a lot of your toolkit is empowered by this. I like the fact that some of the best borrowed power is being brought from Dragonflight into the War Within in terms of Chrono Warden. I like that Spirit Bloom is leaving a hot, and I even seen certain people running that build in raid and playing around that Spirit Bloom hot. Now, I'm not sure what the best build is going to be, but there's a lot of experimentation, and I'm sure there's going to be people who are going to try to optimize Chrono Flame if they really want to. But I want to be harsh about where to place Chrono Warden in this fun tier list. I know for a lot of people, they might place this in a more passive section, but I had fun playing Chrono Warden, and it's almost going into that A tier, but my enjoyment is probably stemming more from the fact that you're getting so much of that cool borrowed power from Dragonflight. So I think a more fair assessment might be B tier, but honestly, this can change for me in the future. And now let's talk about Flame Shaper, and honestly, it's kind of a banger, because you do have Engulf, which can be used offensively, defensively, and its power is going to be increased the more periodic effects you have on the target. And you also have things like Enkindle, where your essence abilities are going to be placing a hot or a dot depending on your usage, and you can play around this to empower your Engulfs further. But I think where Flame Shaper really takes off is with Consume Flame, because you can use Engulf on targets that have Dream Breath to kind of do AoE healing. And I know the tooltip doesn't really show here, but you can also use Engulf on targets that have Fire Breath to do AoE damage. Oh, and I really like talents like Life Cinders, because it changes your existing abilities to mean something else also, because you can use Renewing Blaze on others. So now you have more defensive abilities at your disposal. Keep in mind, when using this on others, you also get the Renewing Blaze effect on yourself. I just think with Flame Shaper, Engulf feels like a really fun button to press. For example, right here, I'm going to be using my Dream Breath, and then on the targets that have Dream Breath, I'm going to be using my Engulf, and you can see the numbers right now just popping up. And I think that's really, it's just a dopamine hit. It's fun to use. So I think Flame Shaper is going to add additional layer to your Preservation of Evoker gameplay. And I think a lot of people are going to like that, because it also has a min-maxy feel to it. Again, we talked about Engulf. We talked about how it interacts with additional periodic effects. Oh, and I almost forgot, Blizzard has recently allowed you to store Engulf in stasis, which could open up for some spicy combos. So there is a lot of good things happening here. In terms of my ranking for Flame Shaper, honestly, the more I think about this, I think it might be deserving of that S tier, but I'm going to be placing it in A tier for the time being, because I want to test it out a bit more. Now let's go to Restoration Druid, and I'm going to be talking about the Wildstalker. And Wildstalker is relatively passive, and I think Resto Druid hero talents in general are kind of passive, but you look at things like Thriving Growth, and the basis of Wildstalker certain healing abilities are going to apply HOTS and certain damaging abilities are going to apply DOTS. At its very core, it's very, very simplistic, but it's kind of relevant to the Druid class fantasy of HOTS and DOTS. Now, we talked about the fact that certain heals are going to apply symbiotic blooms on your allies. We also kind of have to cover the fact that it does encourage you to go kitty weaving, it does encourage you to do that kitty DPS, because your abilities are also going to apply Bloodseeker Wines on enemies, and I think it's important to track them because of things like Bursting Growth, which allows you to get extra value from it. And on top of that, with Vigorous Creepers, you really want to make sure you're tracking symbiotic blooms on targets, because your healing on those targets is going to be increased by a whopping 20%. And I know this has been buffed in the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure if it's going to get nerfed or changed, but it is important to track it. At the end of the day, Wildstalker is somewhat random. For example, if you're approaching a trash pack or a boss and there is a lot of healing needed, you kind of really want those symbiotic blooms to proc at those times, and Blizzard has kind of buffed the proc rate over the last couple of weeks. And with Wildstalker, I do really like the fact that you get extra reward from kitty weaving, because I personally really enjoyed that kind of gameplay, and I think it requires a decent amount of effort to pull it off correctly. But at the end of the day, I probably will place Wildstalker in terms of my fun ranking somewhere close or in that more passive tier, because I do like that it encourages you to kitty weave. I know that's going to split opinions. Some people enjoy it, some people don't. I like that it has that. I'm not a huge fan of the orangey elements, and I generally feel it just feels a little bit more passive than some of the other hero talent builds that are out there. And now let's talk about Keeper of the Grove, and this is another one of those hero talents that in my eyes is a little bit more passive, but it does tie into your Grove Guardian usage, which is again more controlled than something like Wildstalker, where your procs are a little bit more random, while Keeper of the Grove is all about that Grove Guardian usage. And then you have talents like Harmony of the Grove, where you can use or decide how many Grove Guardians you want to use, because that is going to give you a healing increase. And in terms of my fun ranking for Keeper of the Grove, it's, you probably know already where this is gonna go. It's gonna go in the more passive section. I think it fully deserves this spot. It's not necessarily bad, but it's not necessarily the most engaging type of gameplay. But I do want to mention that even though Resto Druid, in my eyes, in terms of hero talents, have a bit more passive side to them, I don't think it's the end of the world, because you can opt in for different choices based on the content you're doing. For example, if I'm pugging content, I might opt in for Keeper of the Grove because I want a more reliable HPS increases, because it kind of revolves around Grove Guardians. But let's say I'm not pugging and I'm confident about the group that I'm joining, I might opt in for something like Wildstalker because I want to get rewarded for my kitty weaving. I want to provide maybe more damage or focus more on DPS, and I think those choices are pretty good. At the end of the day, I would have liked to see one hero build that is a bit more engaging for Resto Druid, but the sky is not falling. Just a small disclaimer, because I enjoy kitty weaving a lot, I enjoy doing as much damage as possible as Resto Druid, so Wildstalker is something that I gravitate towards, and it might be more fun, especially if I join a group that is coordinated and I feel confident in. Unfortunately, a lot of my testing was done in pug groups, so I didn't get to test out Wildstalker as much. And this is why I'm placing it in the more passive tier as well, because I do feel the enjoyment of this hero tree is also going to depend on the group that you're in. Let's talk about Mistweaver Monk, and we'll talk about Conduit of the Celestials. You get a 1.5 minute cooldown with Celestial Conduit, which Blizzard removed Essence Font for Mistweaver Monks, and it almost feels like they made Essence Font 1.5 minute cooldown equivalent that also has damaging portion to it. And I'm all for this. I even placed Celestial Conduit in the same keybind where I used to have Essence Font. On top of that, you kind of also have this spell procky gameplay with things like Strength of the Black Ox. After Zoon assists you, your next Enveloping Mist is going to have a shorter cast, and it's also going to apply Absorb to 5 nearby allies. I do kind of wish that the cast time reduction for Enveloping Mist after you get this proc would actually be instant cast, which kind of fits into that melee Mythic Plus playstyle that I was running as a Mistweaver Monk when it comes to the War Within beta. But honestly, it's not the end of the world, and I really did enjoy Conduit of the Celestial. I don't think it's the most engaging hero build out there, but I did like playing around the cooldown. I did like the spell procs you were getting. It felt in line with Mistweaver rotation, and in terms of my fun tier list, I'm probably going to be placing Conduit of the Celestial somewhere in A tier. I don't think it's the highest A tier, but I did enjoy my time with this hero build. And now let's go to Mistweaver Monk and Master of Harmony, which I think is actually kind of funny, because you can spend quite a long time reading all the tooltips and trying to understand exactly what it does. At the end of the day, you are going to get an additional resource, Vitality, which you can track. This tree also revolves around Thunder Focus Tea, which places an additional aspect on the usage, on how you use it and how you optimize it. And I really like the fact that you have, again, choice nodes in this instant that gives you more healing in terms of Purified Spirits, or gives you more damage in terms of Harmonic Gambit, which honestly is a great option to have for any hero tree, depending on the player. Just like for Resto Druid is running Wildstalker, you want to track Bloodseeker Wines, you want to track Symbiotic Blooms, you also want to track Aspect of Harmony for Master of Harmony Mistweaver, because targets damaged or healed by your Aspect of Harmony take 10% increased damage or healing from you, which kind of draws similarities to other hero talents like I just mentioned. I also like things like Overwhelming Force because visually it's quite pleasing, and it also makes you think about your positioning as a Mistweaver Monk running this hero build. So just to go back on my previous point, I know there's going to be certain players who are going to be tracking Vitality, making weak cores, optimizing their Thunder Focus Tea usage, and just optimizing the heck out of this hero build. And there's going to be other players who are just going to be picking Master of Harmony and they're just going to be playing like they usually do. So in terms of my fun tier list for Master of Harmony, some people will probably place it in the more passive kind of version. But I'm going to play a little bit of a devil's advocate here, try and see both sides. And I do think that Master of Harmony can be optimized in a fun way and you can have an interesting time with it. But I wouldn't disagree if you place it in here either. So for my final ranking, I'm going to be placing in B tier. And let me know how you feel about this. Let's talk about Holy Paladin right now. And Holy Paladin has quite a distinctive hero builds, which makes you feel different depending on which build you're running. We're going to talk about Herald of the Sun, and Herald of the Sun just adds a lot of healing over time to your toolkit because, for example, Eternal Flame replaces Word of Glory, and Eternal Flame has a initial heal to it and a hot portion. Look at things like Dawnlight, which can be used offensively or defensively to apply a dot or a hot, which is going to be procced by the usage of Holy Prisma Barrier of Fate, and then you get to decide how you want to use it based on which Holy Power spending ability you're going to do, which then also ties in with things like Sun's Avatar, where using your wings you become linked to your Dawnlight, which basically sends out these beams that's visually pleasing, and then on top of that, activating wings applies up to 4 Dawnlights onto nearby allies or enemies. And on top of that, you also have talents like Lingering Radiance, where Dawnlight, when it expires or is extended, is going to leave Eternal Flame on an ally. Keep in mind, this talent has been nerfed in this week's build, so I'm not sure what the best choice is going to be, but tuning is always ongoing. So what does it feel like playing Holy Paladin Herald of the Sun? Honestly, I've had a blast, especially when I'm using my wings, it's shooting out beams. It's giving people Dawnlight. When those Dawnlight expire or extended, they're leaving Eternal Flame depending on the talent build you're running, and now you're chaining these hots and then you're applying hots through Eternal Flame. It feels kind of weird to see that as a Holy Paladin, but honestly not in a bad way. For my overall fun ranking for Herald of the Sun, I'm probably going to be placing it somewhere in A tier. I know some people might disagree because some might say it goes against the class fantasy of Holy Paladin, but I had a blast. I like what it brings. I like how the hots feel, and it's something different. If I don't enjoy Herald of the Sun, I'll try out something like Lightsmith, which we need to go and cover right now. So this brings us to Lightsmith, and honestly, it went through multiple different iterations. Initially, I really didn't like this too much because it does have this support element to it, and over time, I've grown to kind of like it because you do have Holy Armament. This is going to provide you with a 2 buff rotation in terms of Holy Bulwark, which can be used on yourself or allies, and this is going to provide an Absorb or Sacred Weapon, which can also be used on allies or yourself, which is going to provide a buff that's going to add additional damage or healing. So this is very simplistic. 2 rotating buffs are not going to make or break your gameplay. Again, I'm saying this right now because we're going to talk about Priest or Oracle Priest, and there's going to be a couple of things that I want to mention about them. But I enjoy, or at least I tolerate, how the Lightsmith is playing right now with the support. And it's not even kind of like a full-on support build because you're kind of sharing the wealth with talents like Solidarity. If you bestow an ornament or if you use an ornament on an ally, you also gain its benefit. If you use an ornament upon yourself, a nearby ally also gains its benefit, which kind of helps with certain people's opinions towards Lightsmith, because I know people were a little bit scared about, hey, if I have to play Lightsmith, am I giving away my buffs to others so they feel stronger and I feel weaker? Instead, you're just kind of sharing it. I do think that some of the Lightsmith hero talents are somewhat uninspired and could be changed to be a bit more intriguing, but that is my personal opinion. At the end of the day, I really do enjoy the fact that with Lightsmith, the tankiness that you get from Holy Bulwark especially when you're running higher mythic plus content. I felt a lot more safer, so that is a good thing. But for my overall ranking, I want to be placing Lightsmith somewhere in B tier because I do think this is going to split a lot of people's opinion. There's going to be people who really enjoyed that kind of support build, and I think Blizzard actually did a decent job in terms of adding support elements to a hero build. And I think certain people are going to really love that. They place it in A tier. But for me, generally, I do like playing Lightsmith once in a while. I enjoy the tankiness. I talked about this. I enjoy the elements that it provides, but I'm not really crazy about support. So overall, this is in B tier for me. But don't get me wrong, there's other heroes who have hero talents that have this support element, buffing other allies. But I do think that Lightsmith did a very decent job at it. And let me know, are you a type of person that likes that kind of support element, or you're someone who just shies away from it completely? And now let's talk about Priest, and this is going to be a little bit difficult because we're going to talk about Oracle, and Oracle is basically shared by Holy Priest and Discipline Priest, and there's a little bit of a differences when it comes to some of the hero talents. As an example, waste no time for Holy Priest. Premonition causes your next heal or prayer of healing cast to be instant and costs 15% less mana. For Discipline Priest, this affects Power Word Radiance instead. So there is a little bit of difference, but the main thing is going to be Premonition, which is basically a rotating buff, somewhat similar to Blessing of Summer, which, again, there is issues with this, but let me know how I feel about this. First of all, Premonition, you have 3 different distinct buffs in terms of Premonition of Insight, Piety, and Solace. And on top of that, you also be running something like Clairvoyance, which means that you will also get an additional buff, which gives you all the other buffs. So overall, you have quite a rotation that you need to keep track of, and there's going to be certain buffs that might be more powerful than others, and you want to, how do I say, proc them at the right time, and sometimes they can be a little bit awkward. I definitely believe, again, this is somewhat comparable to something like Holy Paladin Lightsmith. Holy Paladin Lightsmith has only 2 distinct buffs, so it's a lot easier to rotate and manage, while Premonition has a lot more. Now, keep in mind, I actually did enjoy my time as Holy Priest running something like Oracle, running like Premonition, because I think it fits with the class rotation a little bit more. I think Holy Priest rotation is a little bit less restrictive than something like Discipline Priest, who relies on these pet windows and things like that, and I felt like Oracle for Holy Priest wasn't all that bad. But on the flip side, while running Oracle as Discipline Priest, you have to remember, most of my testing was done in Mythic Plus content. Discipline Priest relies on these windows, these pet windows, in order to activate or use the right abilities in the right order to maximize your damage and healing, and having rotating buffs can sometimes feel a little bit clunky because maybe the wrong buff has been activated, maybe the buff is about to activate. Do I delay my ramp? What do I do? And it just felt a little bit out of place. But I can also see, as a disc priest in something like raid content, running Oracle, you're preparing for mythic raid bosses, you're making a spreadsheet of where to activate your buffs, where to activate your premonition buffs, maybe combining it with evangelism and things like that, depending on tuning. This structured kind of gameplay might be appealing to certain players, and maybe Oracle fits into that structured gameplay a little bit more. But I do want to have a special mention for Premonition of Insight, which basically gives you CDR for your next 3 spells, which honestly can be used in so many different ways depending on situation you're approaching. For example, maybe there's tons of debuffs that are coming out and they need to be dispelled. You could use Premonition of Insight and dispel multiple times. But again, this is dependent on situation, but I like that Blizzard gave you this ability that can be optimized in multiple different ways. And I know I covered this already, but I do want to mention that I did enjoy the fact that you have Waste No Time as Discipline Priest, which allows you to have an instant cast Radiance after using Premonition, which again, it brings me back to the older Dragonflight days. So for my overall ranking for Oracle Priest, I definitely believe that Blizzard could iterate further onto this hero build. It could make it a little bit more fun, maybe reduce the number of buffs to make it a little bit more manageable. I'm not sure, but there's definitely ways to improve this, and I only have one icon in order to place or rank Oracle for Discipline Priest and Holy Priest, and it creates a little bit of issues. But if I was ranking Oracle purely for Holy Priest, it would probably be somewhere in the B tier. We talked about this because I do feel that the Oracle rotating buff system is not that bad for Holy Priest. When it comes to Discipline Priest, if I were to rank Oracle, I would probably place it somewhere lower because, again, we talked about the fact that Discipline Priest has a lot of these ramps, pet ramps or pet windows, and they need to optimize the buttons that you need to press, and then you have rotating buffs on top of that, which might not align perfectly. We also talked about how that might change in rating. Again, This is my overall ranking for Oracle because I only have one icon. I'm going to be placing in D tier, but if you're someone who just skipped this part of the video for Priest, my ranking for Oracle when it comes to Holy Priest will be somewhere closer to B tier, but my ranking for Oracle for Discipline Priest, because majority of my testing was done in Mythicus, would be somewhere closer to D because it feels a little bit clunky. Now let's talk about Holy Priest and Archon. Again, I'm losing my voice a little bit, so keep with me, but I genuinely like what they did, or what Blizzard did with Archon, because they empowered one of your talents and kind of built around it, and that is going to be Halo. And visually it's extremely pleasing, and I'm actually going to add additional points because I think I like the way that it looks like. It's not the most overcomplicated hero build out there. It just makes Halo more powerful, and then it kind of builds around that because, for example, there's going to be Halo shooting out of you, there's going to be multiple Halos created, and on top of that, creating Halo also grants Surge of Light, so you're able to heal on the move as well. And then the allies that are healed by your Halo also have a stacking buff that increases the healing that they receive from you. And again, I have to mention, there's nothing really crazy about this. It's not overcomplicating things. It's just adding additional value to one of your existing talents and kind of forcing you or allowing you to play around this. And I think there's nothing really wrong with this. And in terms of my fun ranking for Archon, I'm definitely going to give additional points for the visuals because I think it's very thematic to Priest, seeing Halo going outwards and then returning and just create. It adds additional oomph to Halo, and it makes it really fun to press. And I think because of this, I'm going to be placing in A tier. Again, there's additional points given here because of the visuals, which I don't think it's all that bad. And lastly, let's go to Discipline Priest and Void Weaver. And if you're someone who's just looking for hero talent based on visuals, this is it. The visuals of Void Weaver are absolutely insane, and we're going to talk about this. So first of all, this is going to be based around your Mind Blast windows. And if you look at the actual gameplay, it almost feels like you have window within window, because again, we talked about Discipline Priest pet windows, where it's going to be Shadow Fiend or Mindbender. You have those windows, and then on top of that, now you have an Entropic Rift window. After pressing Mind Blast, there's going to be an Entropic Rift that is going to follow enemies, again visually pleasing, but the main thing for me is that your Smite is going to turn into Void Blast during those Rift windows, and it's going to change the way Smite looks, and honestly, it just feels so fun to press. But keep in mind, Void Blast tuning has been an absolute nightmare for Blizzard, because Blizzard is trying, at least in my eyes, to create a fun and engaging rotation. And it's relatively hard when you look at Discipline Priest, because how do you create a rotation that is fun during your pet windows and your Rift windows? How do you create a fun rotation just during your Rift windows without the pet? And I think the tuning is still ongoing, but I'm sure Blizzard is going to be able to do it. And on top of that, there are certain choice nodes where Blizzard is probably trying to change up how your Discipline Priest feels during these Rift windows. For example, Darkening Horizon, where Void Blast increases the duration of Entropic Rift by 1 second up to maximum 3 seconds. Or Void Empowerment, where summoning an Entropic Rift extends the duration of your 5 shortest atonements by 1 second. Of course, everything is going to be based on tuning, and we'll see how Blizzard is going to try and balance things like Void Blast, and there's still issues with it. And in terms of my overall fun ranking for Void Weaver, honestly, if it was based on aesthetics alone, it would be easy S tier. I love the fact that it changes the aesthetics of existing spells like Smite into Void Blast during the Rift window. But for the overall ranking, I would probably place it in A tier. I still think it could be improved, or the tuning is still ongoing. But guys, let me know how you feel about my fun ranking, and let's go to the summary. So the summary of the video is why you're watching this video, to tell you what's fun, because it's completely subjective and you should play whichever hero talent you like or enjoy or resonate with. This is my fun tier list. Keep in mind, most of my testing was done in Mythicus content, so I'm not exactly 100% sure how some of these hero talent builds are going to play in raid, so my fun tier list might change in the future. But overall, there's a lot of things that I could change depending on certain situations. I think a lot of people could actually place Flame Shaper in S tier, because I think it has a unique gameplay to it. I think Preservation and Evoker hero talents are actually pretty fun. A lot of people might place Totemic in S tier because of Surging Totems, because of Lively Totems. There's a lot of good things about it. I genuinely believe that I could bring Wildstalker a little bit higher, because I didn't get to test out as much as I wanted to, or I didn't get to test it out in more organized groups where I feel confident about providing additional damage, therefore making full use of this hero build. Like I mentioned before, I think if you base it pure on aesthetics alone, Void Weaver would be an easy S tier. I also think there could be a lot of people who would play Lightsmith Holy Paladin because they really enjoy that kind of support playstyle, and I think Lightsmith actually provided, or Blizzard did, a decent job of kind of giving you a taste of that support gameplay. And I think that's actually really interesting. I can definitely tell you that there's going to be Mistweaver players who would place Master of Harmony in that more passive tier. We talked about the different levels of optimization. There's going to be players who track Vitality, optimize Thunder, Focus, D usage, and there's going to be Mistweaver Monks who pick Master of Harmony and they just play like they usually do. So it really depends on the type of player you are. And lastly, I really want to talk about Oracle, because Oracle for Holy Priest would be placed in B tier for me, but I only have one icon. And Oracle for Discipline Priest, specifically because of my Mythicalist testing, I felt it was a little bit clunky. I think Blizzard could actually iterate further on Oracle, further on premonition buffs, and they could make it more fun. So I'm hoping for more changes to happen for Oracle in the future. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but I do hope for it. But my Oracle ranking is very different when it comes to Holy Priest or when it comes to Discipline Priest, because I genuinely believe these rotating buffs fit Holy Priest a little bit more, because Holy Priest has less restrictive gameplay when compared to Discipline Priest and the ramps that it has with pets. And to touch on Chrono Warden for Preservation of Evoker, I know a lot of people might see Chrono Warden as a little bit more on that passive side, but honestly, I had a blast with Chrono Warden. It's mainly because you get all of this borrowed power from Dragonflight baked into Chrono Warden in the War Within. It almost feels like Chrono Warden Preservation of Evoker is not a hero build, but this is what Preservation of Evoker should feel like by default. So I'm genuinely a little bit confused about where to place it. I'm trying to please all sides here. Chrono Warden could definitely climb for me, but I can see both opinions. And Farseer is one of those hero talent builds for Resto Shaman that has grown on me over the last couple of weeks because of certain changes. It's something that I didn't really enjoy initially. I preferred Totemic a lot more, but Farseer is climbing, and maybe with further testing it might go to that A tier, but I just need to test it a bit more, especially in something like raid content. But guys, let me know how you would rank hero talent builds for healers. Is there any hero talent build that deserves that S tier? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoy these type of videos, like and subscribe, and just remember, fun is subjective. There is no right or wrong answer, and let me know.